Peace be upon you. Today, we need to talk about a story that is absolutely crucial for anyone who is committed to worshiping God and God alone. It's a story of a great awakening, yes, but also a truly tragic fall. And understanding it, really understanding it, is vital for protecting our faith and holding on to the pure, perfect, unaltered Word of God.
So here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to trace the entire journey of Rashad Khalifa. We'll start with his initial call back to the Quran, which was honestly a necessary awakening for so many of us. But then we're going to follow that path as it twisted, as it turned into tragic error, as his ego started to overshadow the very truth he once championed.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to go back in time. You have to understand the world he was speaking to, a world that was desperately in need of the message you first brought.
By the 1970s, the simple, pure monotheism of the Quran, well, it was buried. It was buried under centuries of man-made traditions. So much of religious practice was dominated by Hadith and Sunnah, these collections of sayings and stories that were attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, but written down hundreds of years after he was gone. And in so many places, these man-made books were actually elevated above the clear word of God, which led to just immense confusion, division, and all kinds of practices that had absolutely no foundation in the Quran itself.
And then, into all of this confusion came Rashad Khalifa. And at first, wow, he was like a breath of fresh air. He stood up and he challenged all of this cultural baggage. He correctly pointed out that this brutal punishment of stoning, it's nowhere in the Quran. He argued against the idol worship that was happening at tombs, the veneration of saints. He even pushed back against the over-the-top glorification of the Prophet Muhammad, reminding people that our one single purpose is to worship God alone.
His message was just so simple and powerful. The Quran is complete, perfect, and it is all you need. For so many of us, this was a profound awakening. It was like coming home. Then, in 1974, he announced something that really felt like a modern miracle.
He claimed he had discovered a secret mathematical code hidden inside the Quran, a code that proved its divine authorship, a proof that was designed for our modern scientific age.
He pointed to this one specific verse in Surah 74, over it is 19. This, he claimed, was the key. He proposed that the number 19 was the foundation of this incredibly complex mathematical structure woven into the very fabric of the Quran, a divine signature for the computer age.
And his initial findings, you have to admit, were genuinely fascinating. He started with the Bismillah, that opening phrase of almost every chapter, and he showed it has exactly 19 Arabic letters. Simple but startling, right? Then he pointed out the whole book, 114 chapters. That's a perfect multiple of 19. And the patterns just got deeper. The letter Qaf in Surah 50, it appears 57 times. And get this, in the opening initials of Surah 42, the letter Qaf also appears 57 times. Both numbers are exactly 19 times 3. I mean, this was exciting. It felt like real, tangible, mathematical proof.
But here's the thing about real discovery, about real science. The evidence has to fit the theory. And this, right here, is where the story takes a very dark turn. This is the moment the tragedy truly began, when the sacred, unchangeable text of the Quran started to clash with his theory.
This is the question that defines everything, isn't it? What do you do when the data, the facts, don't fit your hypothesis? Your answer to that question reveals everything about your motives. Are you truly searching for truth, or are you just trying to prove yourself right?
And this really shows the two paths, the two choices. A humble researcher, a person of integrity, they question their own theory. They accept the data. But Rashad's ego, it just wouldn't let him be wrong. So instead of questioning his theory, he made a truly faithful choice. He questioned the eternal protected word of God.
Okay, let's look at the specifics of how this all broke down, because once he decided that his theory was more important than the truth itself, he began to actively manipulate the Quran to force it to fit his numbers.
A perfect example is in Surah 68, which opens with the letter Nun. For 1,400 years, the preserved text has 132 instances of that letter. Now that number isn't divisible by 19. So to force the count to be 133, which is 19 times 7, he just invented a new spelling rule out of thin air. He claimed the initial Nun should be spelled out, which magically adds an extra letter to the count. This has zero, and I mean zero, basis in any manuscript anywhere ever. He was fabricating evidence.
But that was just the beginning.
What he did next wasn't just some intellectual error. It was a profound spiritual transgression. This was unforgivable.
He took it upon himself to literally delete the last 2 verses of Surah 9 from the Quran, verses 128 and 129. And why? Because some of his word counts were off. To make his numbers work, he just declared that these 2 verses from God's book were false.
And look, we don't have to guess about this. We have the physical, archaeological proof. We have the oldest Quranic manuscripts in the world. The Sunnah manuscript in Yemen, the top copy in Turkey, the Samarkand in Russia. Every single ancient copy of the Quran ever discovered contains Surah 9, verses 128 and 129. There is absolutely zero evidence for his claim. He wasn't restoring the Quran, he was inventing his own.
So here's the crucial point. God himself, in his own book, promises that he will protect his word. So to claim that 2 verses were somehow corrupted and that nobody noticed for 1,400 years until you came along, that's not just arrogant. It is a direct attack on God's own promise. It is claiming that God failed.
And once he had decided that his own theory was more important than God's preserved word, well, the floodgates of ego just burst wide open. And it led him to make claims that defy the very foundation of our faith in God alone.
Just listen to this. He started calling himself God's messenger of the covenant. He claimed he was taken into the heavens where he met all the prophets, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and that they all pledged allegiance to him. He literally elevated himself above all of God's messengers. When people pointed out translation errors in his English version, he didn't just defend them. He said, "This is not my translation. This is God's translation." He even twisted the meaning of the Arabic word daba, which means a living creature, and just renamed it the computer to force a false prophecy about himself into the book.
And then came the final, most tragic step. He shattered the very foundation he claimed to be defending, pure monotheism. He fell into Shirk, the one unforgivable sin of associating partners with God. He actually created a theology where he claimed that God appointed Satan as a temporary god over the earth.
This is a direct, blasphemous violation of the Quran's most central message, a message stated so clearly right here in verse 4384. He is the only God in the heavens and the only God on the earth. It's unambiguous. The man who started by smashing idols ended by elevating the devil to a god. So, what's the lesson here? How do we take the vital truth he first showed us while completely rejecting the dangerous falsehoods he fell into later? I think the best way to see it is through this metaphor. Think of him as a broken alarm clock. You see, an alarm clock has one job, to wake you up. And for that, we can be thankful. Rashad's initial call to return to the Quran alone was a necessary wake-up call that rescued so many of us from the slumber of tradition. But once you're awake, you don't worship the clock, right? You turn to the true source of light, the sun. And when that alarm clock is broken, when it's deleting God's verses and teaching outright heresy, you have to throw it away. You must discard it completely and turn to the one unwavering source of truth, the pure, unaltered Quran.
The ultimate lesson here is timeless, and it is absolutely crucial. We must always follow the message. Our commitment, our allegiance is to God's book, and to God's book alone, trusting in His promise that He will always protect it. If this message of pure monotheism resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel, God Alone, Quran Alone, and help us spread this truth by liking, sharing, and commenting. Peace be with you.